that inquiry for us. For now, though, we'll roll on with the rest of the day's political debate with my panel today. I've got Stephen Jones and Tony Smith joining me from the Labor Party and, of course, from the Liberal Party. Gentlemen, thank you both for your time.
Good to be here.
We're going to start on the Royal Commission. We've had half a dozen inquiries on this already, Tony Smith, the coronial inquiry included in that. What will come out of this that's any different, and I suppose also that makes it anything other than something politically motivated?
Oh, well, it's not the latter. I mean, this was an extraordinary program like no other, and the all-encompassing nature of a Royal Commission is important. We made that clear before the election, made it clear for those families who suffered so much. So it's quite right and proper that the Royal Commission's underway and examining every single aspect of what went wrong with the aim of ensuring that it can't happen again.
Has this started a trend, perhaps, though, that Labor might follow? Something that's seen as getting your comeuppance when you get to power, or giving it out to the other side? I mean, I'll take an example. The Howard government's reasons for going into the Iraq War. There was plenty of unrest amongst some rusted-on Labor voters about that. It also involved the deaths of Australian soldiers, of course, in this case, rather than workers. Would that have been justified?
I don't think you can make that comparison. I mean, we're talking here about a government program, not just a failed government program. Let's face it, there are government programs that go wrong from time to time, but this went monumentally wrong. Lives were lost. It was a rushed program, and it's quite right that there be a Royal Commission. We made it clear before the election that's what we do. Now the Royal Commission is independent. How that is conducted is totally at arm's length from the government.
Stephen Jones, when it comes to, I suppose, the element of the political fallout, a big problem, particularly for the families involved here, was that Kevin Rudd took so long to apologise. Yeah. That's a problem for him, isn't it?
Kevin Rudd will speak for himself on this, and I understand that he either has or is about to give evidence in the matter. But a couple of quick points. Firstly, this will be the 9th inquiry that we've had into this particular scheme. By any standard, excessive. Of course, it's politically motivated. I will make this point, though, Tom. It is possible for an inquiry to be established for politically motivated reasons, as this one has been, and for it still to do some good. And if we're going to do anything about the 4 people a week, over 200 people a year who die at work, then an inquiry such as this might turn its gaze to what we can do to ensure that people who get up and go to work every day return home to their families, and that'd be a good thing.
All right, I might turn our gaze to the South Australian election. Stephen Jones, independents, Bob Such and Jeff Brock obviously are looking like they'll be kingmakers in all likelihood. They're both obviously got their Conservative seats. Should they be factoring that in, and the fact the popular vote's gone with the Liberal Party here?
Oh, look, I understand that one of those seats probably is a traditionally more Conservative seat than the other. The other one, absolutely not. It's been held by all sides of politics and none over the last 2 decades. There's a lot of votes to be counted yet, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. Big rap for Jay Weatherall. Everyone had him written off at the end of last week, and we're talking about his post-political career. So I think he's doing well. Let's see how the votes come in, and then we can start talking about who's going to be the next.
We know, though, the majority of votes will be for the Liberal Party when it comes to 2-party preferred.
Well, I don't think we do know what's going to happen with those
That's a big
quarter
call.
of a million votes that are yet to come in.
That would be some
quarter of a million votes yet to come in. Can I say something, though?
You'd be having to get 80 or 90% of them, I think.
80 to 90% would be good in anyone's standard. But let's make a point about where you're going to on this. The electoral rules in South Australia have been known for several decades now. If the Liberal Party wanted to make a complaint about the way the boundaries were called, they've had 4 years to do that, not a peep. They thought they were going to rump it in and let, like, a bunch of kids who are spitting the dummy. Now they're complaining about the rules of the game.
All right, I'm going to
a bit rich.
Come on, Jones.
I'm going to just, I'll go to that point and give you a chance, Tony Smith, but just to add in the fact, the 53%, which granted I just used, but is it not a little bit of a misnomer in the sense that there's a very high percentage of the vote going to the Liberal Party in the regional areas? So, I mean, we've always known that this is winning seats. That's what Australian elections are. Isn't pointing to 53% as the headline of this a little bit of a misnomer?
Not at all. I mean, it's extraordinary, and the public would rightly be bewildered in South Australia that 53%, that's basically what we got at the federal election, can leave a very close result with the Liberal Party behind on seats. Now, look,
but there are regional seats though where you've got a massive advantage. But Graham, hasn't that pumped up that percentage a little bit? Well,
Graham Richardson made the point quite well this morning on one of the programs on Sky, where he said 51-49, you can understand with these sorts of differences, but the 53 is way beyond the par. Now, I don't pretend to, I mean, Jonesy and I are political obsessives, but I think we both agree we don't pretend to know everything about South Australian state politics, but 53% is extraordinary. You make the good point, Tom, there are a lot of votes to count. I mean, at every election, be it state or federal, the number of people pre-polling or voting by postal vote just goes up exponentially, and I read somewhere this morning, I think there's 20% of the votes still to count. Now, Jonesy thinks that that's going to get them back to a 50-50 proposition.
My argument is let's not get into an argument about this at this point in time.
Okay.
When it's very tight, some of those seats could go either way. It may become an academic argument. But I will make this point in addition, Tom. We do have a word for constructing boundaries in elections to ensure that one team or another gets up. It's called gerrymandering. It operated in Queensland for quite some time. I don't think anyone should be looking at this and saying, well, let's reconstruct the boundaries of our elections to favour one team or another. You have a set of rules and you play by the rules.
There is within South Australia, though, this Electoral Fairness Act where they're actually supposed to redraw the lines according to the dominant party of the vote after each election.
It is a consideration that has to be taken into account.
It wasn't really done after the last election, was it?
Well, the independent body looked at it, and as my understanding is there were redistributions that occurred.
Not very significant, though.
No, there were redistributions that occurred, Tom, and if people have got a complaint, they've had 4 years to make a complaint about the boundaries that have been made. Not a peep out of it. They're now spitting the dummy now. Frankly, they stuffed up their campaign, and that's the real fact of the matter. And they had, the Prime Minister blow in there in the last week, make some ill-timed announcements, pretty gaff-handed, cack-handed announcements. It hasn't gone well, and now they're complaining about the rules of the game.
Let me just get this right. I've been trying to understand this all morning with Bill Shorten. Because Tony Abbott's Liberal leader and Prime Minister, we got 53% of the vote. And because Bill Shorten's Labor leader, you got 47. Is that the argument?
No, the argument is simply this. And let's be very clear, I come from a regional electorate, Smithy, and I know that nobody in my electorate would take very kindly to being lectured by somebody from Sydney or Canberra about which way we should exercise our vote on a particular issue. So I don't think Tony Abbott's lecture to the two independents in South Australia will go down too well.
All right.
Not very well at all, I would have thought.
We'll wait and see how it goes down. There's a few days and votes, as you say, to play out. We're going to take a quick break here on Lunchtime Agenda. Back with more after the break.
In 1 hour, you and your family will be forced to flee your home. In 2 hours, in screaming crowds, you will lose your child. In just 1 minute, you can help, and we urgently need you to. Girls like Monica need you. She has seen horrors no child should see. Horrific screams haunt her. Escaping his living hell, Joseph lost his mother, lost grip of her hand. He's scared he'll never see her again. Please give $13 a month to help those who have lost everything. These families have done no wrong. When people have nowhere left to run, UNHCR protects them. When children feel no one cares, we help them. We make sure they get food, water, medical care. That can be the difference between life and death. Please call 1300 66 5545 now. Give $13 a month to help those who have lost everything.
My mum thinks she's tough. She acts like our dog Harry drives her crazy, but she never forgets to put his protection stuff on every month. Think he loves Mum the most.
The Advantage family. We understand each other.
Have you been up all night?
I'm looking for hotel deals.
Why didn't you just go to Hotels Combined? They compare hundreds of travel sites in seconds.
Hotels Combined.
Find the best price in seconds at hotelscombined.com.
With CFDs, I can trade on the rise and fall of indices, shares, forex and commodities.
It's important I can pursue 24-hour trading opportunities and still control my risk.
I use CFDs when I want to trade the markets without putting up the full value of my position.
That's why I trade CFDs with IG, the global CFD specialist, creating opportunity since 1974.
Switch your credit card to Virgin Money now. And with the Virgin Australia Velocity Flyer card, you'll get 0% interest per annum for 14 months on balances transferred.
If you're paying 20% interest on a $7,000 balance, you could save over $1,500.
Plus, earn Velocity frequent flyer points on your everyday purchases. Call 13 21 33 or visit virginmoney.com.au/TV.
My name is Jeff McCallum. I've been a farmer since 1964. We farm about 3,000 hectares around the mine with no till. We grow wheat, canola, barley, field peas and lupins, and our yields are persisting. I've never seen an effect from the mine. There's nothing to affect it. Even on, on the boundary of the mine, it's nothing there. You could be farming anywhere.
Welcome back to Lunchtime Agenda and debating the day's political events and topics. I've got Labor frontbencher Stephen Jones with me and also Tony Smith from the Liberal Party. Now, we've spoken about the South Australian election. Tasmania, I can tell you from being on the ground there, a concerted pitch from Will Hodgman, the soon-to-be Premier or the Premier-elect, was all about strong, stable majority government, of course, in the wake of a Labor-Greens government there. There's always this talk after recent minority governments about chaos. In Tasmania, again, we saw a high amount of legislation passed. Has it been a failure, Stephen Jones, of the Labor Party to promote legislation passed, to do things in a controlled-looking manner? Why have these campaigns against minority government federally and in Tasmania been so successful?
A couple of things. Firstly, congratulations to Will Hodgman. Yeah, great outcome for him. I wish him well for the sake of Tasmania. But, there was one factor here that, just puts everything else in its place, and that is the fact that it was a 16-year government and they were asking to go around for another 4 years now. Almost unprecedented. That was the number one factor, and I think everything else is a distant second to the third.
So you think our system, once it's 3 or 4 terms, you can almost just run it?
Well, there is always going to be exceptions, but as we've said on this program before, it's a really big ask for a government after having done several terms, let alone 16 years, to be getting up and going around again. I have no doubt that the minority government was an issue. The coalition with the Greens, as Bill Shorten has pointed out, was an issue down there, but more than anything it was 16 years.
Tony Smith, the Howard government won 4 elections and then I suppose they picked up some political baggage along the way. Similar story here?
Well, look, I think Stephen's ducking the point of your question about minority governments. I mean, in the end, Labor was so embarrassed by the arrangement they entered into, they ended it just before the election.
Just in January, yep.
But the problem was no one believed them. And I think the other overriding issue down there was the desire from the public after 16 years of failed economic management, really, for a stronger growth state, to actually see a more optimistic future with more jobs. And I think Will Hodgman, over a number of years, hammered that message home.
Let's look at then further to that point and your point about what the factor was there in other elections. The WA Senate, second time around, for various reasons.
Indeed.
Can we agree that that is going to be a referendum on federal issues, on the Abbott government, on the Shorten opposition? And if that's the case, the Liberal Party, needs 3 positions to break even in that election, Tony Smith?
Well, we'd won 3 under any circumstance before the rerun, and it is a referendum on the carbon tax and the mining tax. And we've seen Bill Shorten try to pretend that he might adopt a different position on the mining tax in the next year or 2, but he'll still vote against its abolition here in Canberra. So I agree.
So what does that?
Federal issues are to the fore.
So what does that mean if the Liberal Party managed 2 seats over there? That the voters aren't as with the Abbott government as they were?
Well, look, we'll see what happens. We're campaigning strongly on the mandate we took just over 6 months ago, and you wouldn't get 2 issues of more importance to West Australia than axing the carbon tax and axing the mining tax.
We saw Bill Shorten for the first time talk about a possible shift on the mining tax while in WA. Now, a cynic would say he's tailoring his message, Stephen Jones.
Well, look, if Tony Abbott wants to, go to West Australia or any other poll in this country and say that his #1 priority is giving a tax cut to miners, let him go out and do that. We happen to think that the future of our healthcare system and the future of our kids' education are bigger issues, and who's got a plan for jobs in this country? Tony Abbott's got a target, but he hasn't got a plan about how to get there. These are the issues that are going to matter in the West Australian election, together with the quality of the candidates. Tony and I can wax on all you like about the policy issues and all the rest of it, but we'll also get down to the individual quality of the candidates, and it always throws up some surprises.
It will be a different election in that regard.
There are no
agree
two
with that. Yeah, because I mean you've got a Senate by-election. Normally the focus in the electorate, of course, is on the House of Representative seats, and now you've got a Senate by-election, half the Senate, running for flat chat for the next few weeks. So it's a different sort of election and a different
It will be interesting, won't it? Because it's like a state federal election. So
it's a rare thing in any election where the focus is on the Senate.
Well, we love it.
Rare thing.
More elections, the better at Sky News.
And our Senate colleagues, I'm sure, love it as well, because they never think they get enough attention.
Yeah, you thought you got in the first time and then you were going again. Well, another referendum, if you like, on the Abbott government by some voters has been the March in March protests over the weekend. Now, there were some Greens MPs involved, also Sue Lyons from your party, Stephen Jones. There were some signs at some of these meetings that have been pretty offensive. Adolf Abbott, likening Tony Abbott to Adolf Hitler. Should Labor MPs be careful associating themselves with these sort of events? Remember some of the signs that protests against Julia Gillard when she was Prime Minister. Do Labor MPs need to distance themselves from elements of this? Need to be careful? What do you think?
Well, I was very critical of Tony Abbott standing in front of a sign saying, ditch the witch, ditch the bitch. I thought that was the wrong thing to do. And I'm sure each and every one of our members, state and federal, would take a similar view. Yes, you have got to be careful. But I didn't attend the one in my local area. I was actually opening new facilities for our rural fire service, so I didn't get to mine.
You were doing something normal.
Yeah, but I know there was a big turnout in my electorate, and many of the people who support me were there.
Some of the other signs that were more speaking about policies or potential policies, a lot talking about cuts. We don't want the Abbott government cuts. Is it jumping the gun? I mean, he hasn't handed down a budget yet in May.
Oh, but he's out there flying a different kite every week. You and I know that. They've got the Commission of Audit. It's sitting on their desk. And the only thing that's sitting on top of that is the West Australian Senate election. As soon as that's out of the way, we will see the Commission of Horrors in all of its glory presented to the Australian people. They're keeping it secret till after the election.
One of the kites, you can respond to that as well if you like, Tony Smith, but one of the kites flying out there is this $6 co-payment when it comes to visits to the doctor under bulk billing. If this is something to tackle the cost of healthcare, the overall package, is it going to be any sort of significant factor? I mean, this is a tiny percentage of healthcare costs. It's going to be something you'd have to introduce, see if it's palatable, and then increase, surely.
Look, the point Peter Dutton made about a month ago in a speech in early February was that we had to have a serious conversation about how we maintain a strong health system, not just for the next year or two, but for the next decades. And he's right about that. That requires a serious discussion. It requires being better than just sitting back and pretending, and people like Bill Shorten lowering themselves to the occasion. I mean, again, I don't want to keep quoting Graham Richardson, but he made the point this morning. I mean, health costs are going up 8-9% every year, and with the ageing of the population and intergenerational challenges, it's not good enough just to pretend that we shouldn't have a discussion about these issues.
Okay, and you make that point. Healthcare costs are rising. We've got more disposable income. We're living longer. So both of you, on a bipartisan point, why not increase the Medicare levy? This is something that was brought in years and years and years ago. The proportion of healthcare spending has rocketed up. The Medicare levy has stayed stationary. Why don't you both go out and sell that message to voters that it is needed?
Well, look, the Medicare levy has never covered the cost of health. That's one of the issues with it. I think Stephen would agree with that.
But that percentage that it was covering is now a lot less.
That'd be right. That'd absolutely be right. But I think the points Peter Dutton's raised about into the future, can you really afford to have people on very high incomes not paying anything for healthcare. Now, that's a legitimate debate to have, but it's not about this week or next week. It's about having that discussion so that you can maintain a strong health system.
We do pay. People on high incomes do pay something through the healthcare, for their healthcare. They pay it through the Medicare levy, and if you're on a higher income, you pay a higher Medicare levy than you do if you're on a low income. So we already have a progressive taxation arrangement. Labor was willing to look at the Medicare levy when we introduced the NDIS, and we took a proposal into Parliament and got bipartisan support for it. So the argument is not around whether we need to look at ways to fund Medicare and the health system. We do, and there are savings that can be made as well. But here's my problem with the co-payment. It runs completely opposite to what I thought was a bipartisan position that we were running. Jeff Kennett was very good on this around his mental health campaign, saying, if you're crook, if you've got issues, go and see a doctor. That's the message that we've been putting out for the last few years, whereas the co-payment seems to be suggesting if you're crook, think twice about it. Probably don't go to see a doctor. Save yourself a few dollars.
Well, I mean, that's the
wrong message.
Okay.
The wrong message.
This is interesting though, because I've got Tony Smith from the Liberal Party saying those that can afford it should be possibly paying this $6 amount. Now, if you talk about those that can afford it, means tested, we're going to be talking about people earning possibly more than $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. That realistically is not going to stop someone you wouldn't think going to the doctor. And is there not a strong parallel as well, Stephen Jones, with the fact that you've got Labor wanting to means test private health insurance? I mean, that is also a healthcare spending. Yes, it's voluntary, but that again is where if you're earning more money, you should be paying more. I mean, it just seems like you've swapped sides on this.
No, I have not at all, because one of the greatest areas of growth in our health expenditure is the cost of the private health insurance rebate, on track to $6 billion a year, one of the greatest areas of growth. We have to contain that. So if the Coalition is serious about looking at ways to contain blowouts in our health expenditure, they'll go to the private health insurance rebate. They didn't support us in government when we tried to do it, but they know that they have got to deal with this issue. But the thing about Medicare, it was about providing universal access to our GP services. It has worked for 30 years.
Just going to get your final 20 seconds of thoughts here, Tony Smith. You talk about affordability. It's not going to be affordable, is it, to remove this means testing, private health insurance?
Well, the point Labor refused to comprehend, I mean, apart from the fact they ran to an election in 2007 saying they'd never touch private health insurance, but you need a strong private system and a strong public system. Now, on another program, we can go through the interaction of all of that, but
Medicare's a private system.
But you need both systems to be strong, and that long-term conversation Peter Dutton's kicked off, and I think it's right that he has.
But the affordability of that, very quickly, I mean, that's going to have to be years and years in the future, isn't it?
Well, what you're talking about is, I mean, don't forget with private health insurance, I mean, everyone in private health insurance is saving the public system. And that's why I talk about the interaction of it. But it's certainly a debate we can get into on the next Smith and Jones. More than happy to.
No doubt we will have to.
We've got to get to question time.
Next program, as you say. I'll let you run off to question time. Thank you both for your time today. Gentlemen, thank you for watching.